Hey, what's up everyone? It's Dr. Glenn Vo. I'm super excited to be here at the headquarters of the DECA Dental Group. We have a podcast host. It's none other than the founder of DECA Dental, Dr. Sulman Ahmed.
Welcome to the Emerging Group Practice Podcast, the ultimate hub for unleashing the power within your group dental practice. I'm your host, Dr. Glenn Vo, and together we'll embark on a thrilling adventure to discover revolutionary strategies, breakthrough techniques, and awe-inspiring success stories that will take your practice to the next level. Before I get into this episode, I'd like to give a shout out to one of our sponsors, DocSites. Now, having a website is super important for your practice, but it doesn't have to be expensive. DocSites has been hooking us up with amazing deals with websites for a long time. Go check them out and make sure you ask for the Nifty Thrifty deal.
So you graduated, and talk about like how everything started. So got out of dental school, ready to take over the world and everything.
Yep.
Talk about like that beginning part of your journey.
So lots of bumps along the way, and I think as you kind of hear the story, the takeover of the world probably started third year of dental school. And what ended up happening, I was down here for a summer, and I was going to move back, obviously after finishing school, and I was looking, and this whole uptown area was blossoming. And for those of viewers or people that are listening that are local, there was this W residences going up and this whole luxury thing. And I was just looking at it, thinking one day, if I work hard and I can afford it, this would be cool. And they're like, well, you can afford it. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, you don't have to put anything down. We'll talk to the bank. And they got some information. So while I was in dental school, which by the way, I think I left dental school with $450,000 in student loan debt, I got approved for a $530,000 condo. And I was too embarrassed to share this stuff earlier because it'd be like, what an idiot. But I think at this point, if it helps people just kind of learn, then I'm happy to share it. And so got that without any dollars in the bank account. And I was going to buy a practice out here on Preston and Frankfurt.
Yeah.
So I would shadow, because I was in Boston, I'd have to come back. I'd shadow on weekends. And when the front desk lady was checking out one of the patients on a Saturday, she said the new doctor will see you at his new location. And I was just like, what's the new location? I thought he's selling his practice.
Yeah.
And I found out that he was opening another location 2.5 miles away, basically upgrading it. And I was like, well, I thought I'm buying this practice and it comes with the patients. She's like, well, it comes with some patients, not all the patients. And at that time, Bank of America had approved me for a loan for that practice for about $1 million.
Wow.
So I had $0 to my name. I hadn't graduated dental school, and I was potentially going to be in about $2 million in debt. So ignorance is bliss. I was an idiot. And when that happened, my heart sank. I didn't really know what to do because I felt like I was obligated. I already said, yes, this is bad. Yeah. The loan's already approved. The brokers were putting the pressure on. And I was just like, I can't take that chance. So I backed out of that deal, moved back here, had to live with my parents in Frisco after I told them.
No, wait, what about the high-rise condo?
So that wasn't delivered on time either.
Okay.
So I did end up doing that because I figured if, as a dentist, if I'm making 10,000, this is back in there, I can afford to pay all this stuff. The condo was delayed. The practice never happened because I pulled out, and I was living at home with my parents after I told everybody of this great life I'm going to have.
Yeah.
I was 24, 25 at that time. And so I worked there. And so now I look for a job as an associate, and I didn't really even know how to go about that. And so, but looking back, that was like one of the best lessons. I didn't know anything about dentistry. I didn't know anything about how to do complicated cases or molar endo, or even just treating staff or how insurances work. And, unintentionally, if that practice had closed, I probably wouldn't be here, and you probably wouldn't want to talk to me today.
Well, I mean, you would have been in more debt and in a bad situation.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd ever gotten out of it.
But sometimes that's a perfect example of sometimes when things don't work your way, sometimes it's for the better.
And I think so many people just need to realize that, because I think we live in a world of like instant gratification where everything's measured, success or failure is measured on right now, today. And to build anything great, it just takes time, just like a family.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, oh, I think you're doing a good or a bad job raising kids. You should do this. They should sleep like this. until your kids are older and they're doing their own life and their parents, that's when we can all look back and just say, I think I did it right. But everyone's very quick to give opinions. And I think that's happening in the dental industry too. Just because someone chooses to go a different path, sometimes we don't fully understand that, but we're so quick to judge that.
So, you got this kind of a delay in your plans, right? Mm-hmm. So you had to eat some humble pie and then you became an associate. Talk about from working as an associate, when did you get back into on that road to practice ownership?
Yes, I worked as an associate for 2 years
and
actually learned a ton, a lot of full fee-for-service procedures. At that time, care credit was, at least felt like there was a lot of care credit out there, and patients were doing full mouth, cases. And I was happy, and I started making money. I could at least pay the condo and have a little bit of money saved over. And again, in full transparency, I asked the owner of that practice, we had 3 or 4 practices, I opened up their new office in Allen off of McDermott, for those of you that know where that is, 75 in McDermott. Mm-hmm. And after growing that practice, working 6 days a week, skipping lunches, just because I loved what we're doing. And I remember typing this long email because I was like, I won't be able to articulate it as well. And, I was still young.
Yeah.
And I was like, here's all the reasons where I would love to partner. And I got a response within probably 30 minutes, just no. And I think at that point, it's just like a gut check. I was like, here, I've poured my heart. I'm training doctors. I'm doing all this stuff. And it's just a no. And so at that time, it took getting over, that initial kind of shock. And I was like, I think I just want to do my own thing. And that's when I started looking for practices. Wanted to do a startup, got the Firewheel thing under lease. That construction was supposed to take 3 months. That took much longer, 10 months. And then I realized I'm not going to have any income from a startup. And so I was like, well, I think I should also buy a practice. And so December 1st, we opened our Firewheel location. December 15th, I closed on this practice out in Lake Dallas, which is an existing office. It had been around 8 years. And the dentist out there was local, went to the local schools, churches, and it was a good practice. But I had to figure out, how am I going to juggle 2 places? I was working 6 days a week, and I was managing, building something from scratch, and then also having to buy a practice with paper charts where I wanted everything paperless. It was Monday through Thursday. I wanted to open up Fridays and then eventually Saturdays. They didn't provide all dental services. Mm-hmm. I wanted to bring more to the community in terms of just providing more services. So those are all really, really quick learning lessons that I had to learn on the fly.
I mean, you basically went through a startup and an acquisition. You were doing it at the same time, working, learning, everything. Wow, what a that's the definition right there of hands-on learning right there.
I'll tell you this, and maybe your viewers will appreciate this. On the surface, everyone's like, wow, this is such an inspiration, 2 offices and all that. December 2009, so that now working 6 days a week, the startup wasn't really producing that much. It was getting by, but I'd never done it before, so I didn't know if it's good or bad. Yeah. And I didn't know, at this point, it's going to start being profitable or not. So you're just kind of going through it, and everything else is happening. The market, the world's going to, And December 2009, that payroll had to clear, and I got that Bank of America thing saying you don't have enough funds, insufficient funds, right around a little after Christmas. And I just remember just reading, and I was with family. I was like, I need to go log on to a computer and make sure which account number this is referring, and it's our business account. And at that time, when I left to start my businesses, I had saved $70,000. Yeah. That was all my savings, and I had $1 million in debt between the condo and dental school, $800,000 on the first practice, and $1.2 million on the practice that I'd acquired. So looking back, and I'm only sharing this now because hopefully this is an inspiration to some people. If on paper you looked at that, I should not have been here, and this should never have worked out. But I think it worked out because I was willing to kind of put in the work, and I really had no choice at that point. It was like the whole thing is going to fail or not. And but anyways, that's something. I still feel that feeling in my stomach today.
Yeah.
And I really do, and it's just like this burning thing where I'm like, I never want to feel that way again. And I still feel it with everything I do. Any new project, any new state we enter, it's I don't know. And I used to hate it because I felt like I'm anxious, I'm insecure, but I almost cherish it now because it drives me. You know,
it's kind of like a thing that I actually have this recurring fear all the time, and a lot of other dentists have the same thing. Sometimes I'll wake up and I think that I actually have a test that I've missed studying for. I'm like, do I have a test? Like, if for some reason I thought I had a test or maybe like a big case or something, and then it'll dawn on me like, wait a minute, I'm not in school anymore. Yeah. But I think like those kind of experiences, they stay with you, right? They keep you focused, and they keep you
absolutely.
Just putting the work in and whatnot. Now, obviously, you had just a very unique start. Probably something that a lot of dentists you probably wouldn't recommend them doing the same route, right? Would you say that?
Yeah, and I think the one thing we talked about a little bit earlier, there were no mentors at that time, so there's nobody to talk to. You had a broker and a bank person just pressuring you that if you don't do this, there's a million other people willing to do it, so you better show up and do it. So there's all this pressure to really, the whole thing could have fallen apart. So yes, I wouldn't recommend it. And I think, the future growth though then, because I think once that started working, it took about 2 years for everything to start falling in place. Office 3 and 4 were also episodic. Office 3 was in Plano. It was a friend's wife who was a dentist, and they were like, it was a nice location. And they said that, they're going through hard times, and his wife would have to file bankruptcy, and the bank would take it over. And it was $250,000 to take over the practice and to assume the bank debt. And I was like, look, I'll do it if the bank agrees to it, but on paper, I'm probably not the strongest profile, but the bank agreed to it. So at that time, I was like, if the bank agrees to stuff, that means it must be good. If I'm not doing good, they'll tell me no, and that also happened eventually. But this was the time, and so that was office number 3. And so office number 4 was a call, and I think one of the things, as everyone talks about networking, one thing I was always adamant about is just treating everybody well. And there was a gentleman that I met, and we just started talking, and I've never ever had a meeting where I haven't learned something, or in some way where you don't even expect it, like 10, 15 years later, it kind of comes full circle, just because you were engaged and you treated somebody well. And we just exchanged numbers and talked, and he's like, all right, good luck. I still didn't even have a practice. He called me, and there was a practice out in Sunnyvale. And I'd never heard of where Sunnyvale, Texas is. And the dentist had built this beautiful office with electric handpieces, and he just walked out and left the patients for 2 months. It was just the patients didn't know what was going on. The landlord locked the doors. And he was like, hey, do you want to just lease this office? I was like, man, I don't even know what I'm doing. Okay. Looked at the office, a beautiful office. And I was like, okay, let's structure this. Took over the lease. The owner had financed the equipment, so I had to take that over, negotiated that down, so it was brand new equipment. I still remember, I think it was like $185,000 worth of equipment, so it was like decked out. And I took that note over for 70-something thousand, and that was office number 4, or close to it. I may be missing the order, and that's slowly how it started, but the goal was never to be a DSO, as people call it. And I still, you kind of fall into labels or what people want to call it, but I'm a dentist, I'm a clinician, I love working with dentists, I love inspiring dentists. And as we kind of grew, that became the purpose of the company, was how can we, in this world where God's afforded me the opportunity, where all these people want to have something to do with the company. It could be from the finance world, they're like, hey, you don't need to go to the banks ourselves, we'll kind of give you some equity, and we want to take some chips off the table. As long as I could control that and make sure everything that happens in the dental offices, from the products to our methodology to the labs we use, we control, and we can grow our vision faster, that's really, really powerful. And then what happened after I digested that, and in the world we live in today, is, why are dentists not able to partake in that same opportunity where people who've never gone to dental school want to be involved in dentistry? I think that's a shame. So as I look at DSOs, I'm like, how many are led by dentists? Because if they're not, and most are not, that's a problem, right? Because you can't say we're all clinical and this and that, but you're not you haven't been in a patient's mouth because there's something, that just comes with experience. When you're fixing, or doing a molar endo on number 15 and it's constricted and the patient's in pain and you're just trying to work through and someone's waiting for a hygiene check and your sister.
Man, you give me anxiety right there just talking about that with number 15 and whatnot.
But that allows you to relate at a different level. So really the path then just became is like, can I put a system together where it can create wealth for everybody?
Yeah.
Can we as dentists benefit from it, and everybody who's part of it in some way benefit from it, but not just one party and not the other? And essentially that's what we've tried to do here.
Would you say that once you had that just clarity right there was when you really wanted to grow DECA?
There's never been clarity. I still sometimes feel like I don't know what I'm doing. So the vision kind of evolves and changes as things happen in life. DECA came a point. The name came about. I was in dental school. I finished college on a Saturday and started dental school on a Monday.
Oh wow!
In Boston, I didn't get into a lot of dental schools, but the one I did get into, I ended up going to. And I remember the first day of class, the dean asked, "Great, welcome. How many of you want to be orthodontists?" And like all these hands were going up. Oral surgeons' hands are going up. I was just like, man, I'm just glad I got here. How do these people know? And at that time, I was like, it'd be really cool if I can get all these people to work together with me, because I don't know what it's going to take to be any of those things. And obviously, I wasn't smart enough to become any of those, or nor did I want to. But that's where I was like, one day I'll have 10 offices. And I think it was out of insecurity, because I'm like, all these people know what to do. I don't even know what to do. I'm just going to have 10 offices one day. But that was still, when I started out, it was like 3, 4. Yeah. And then we got to like 2012, 13. I'm like, feels like maybe we'll get to 10. Let's call it DECA. That's how it started.
I love it. Now, how many total offices is DECA now?
Yes, we have around 150 locations. And
so, it was 10, but 10X? 10X, right?
I think you look at the opportunity and the potential. And we're doing 30 to 40 new de novos a year now.
Yeah.
And now we have dentists all around the country. It's just fun,
Now obviously, if you can go back in time and tell your younger self, like, hey, one day if you keep grinding, you're gonna get it to this. Like, in your wildest dreams, did you think DECA was gonna be like this?
I knew it was gonna be something. Yeah. I never thought it was gonna be like this. But I look at it almost in a different way, where I feel like if I'm put in this opportunity today and I'm blessed enough, like, how much bigger could it be in the next few years? But no, I honestly, sometimes I tell my family and my wife, I'm like, I don't even feel like I deserve all this. Like, I don't know why it's happening, And I'm very content however it kind of happens, because I feel like we all have a part to do, and I'm still trying to figure out what that bigger part is. Yeah. But I think at some point it's bringing more dentists together to do something more meaningful that we as a community can be proud about.
And I want to piggyback on that, because a lot of times, look, you're on social media, you're at a different events, and whenever people bring up DSOs or corporate dentistry or any of those things, people like to lump everything into one category, right? And I think a lot of times that's a big problem that in dentistry, they say, well, if you're a part of this, you guys are all doing that, or you're all doing it this way. Yeah. But there's different types of practice, different types of DSOs. What is like a big myth that you get all the time when people are like, they want to learn more about DECA, but they're like, oh, yeah, you're just like this or whatnot. Like, what is like those biggest myths that you have to deal with all the time when people kind of lump DECA with just like it's just a blanket statement, like you guys are all like that?
I think when people usually lump something together, it's usually out of a lack of full understanding or out of insecurity, right? And so I can tell you, just like every dentist is different, every DSO is different. And it's hard. Like, someone could have an experience that's unique to them. And I'm not saying people haven't had that at DECA. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. And there's others that have had great experiences. I would just encourage, I think as a community, as dentists, if there's a dentist who embezzled, state funds and he's on the news, I don't go and assume and just be like, yep, all you dentists out there where no one's watching, no one audits your clinical stuff or your books, that's what you guys are doing. All our stuff's audited, and still, there's this stuff we have to keep up with. So I think it's the same mindset. You cannot generalize and just put a point on something without fully understanding it. And I think the fact is, the way things are growing, there's going to be more consolidation, and some of it's good, and some of it's bad. But that's not for me to decide. And it's I think eventually the results will kind of drive and show what's really working and what's not.
Well, and I'll also say this is that everything evolves, right? And again, whether you like it or not, look, I still like going to the mall and buying things,
Yep.
and I understand that the reality is a lot of people are buying things online,
Yep.
right? Doesn't mean that it's not going to happen just because I don't like it, right? So what I've told people as far as more DSOs and whatnot, what you should do is just change your mindset and say, well, what about a particular DSO that you would like,
Yep.
right? Instead of saying like, hey, I don't want to deal with that, because whether it's DECA or any other large DSO, there's a place for everybody. I mean, there's a lot of dentists that worked with you for years. They love it, right? And if you guys weren't there, they wouldn't have that home, that opportunity, So again, just for those who are just thinking, well, I think DSOs are going to affect the way dentistry is. I mean, what do you say to them, for those that have those concerns?
Yeah, I think, I get that a lot from, we've had dentists who came from one school, worked with us for a few years, and they're like, hey, I kind of want to do what you're doing. I'm like, go ahead and do it. I know one thing any dentist will agree on is our clinical training is probably the best out there. And if you come here and you learn, I almost sometimes joke, instead of an AGD or GPR, you should pay us to train you how to do all this stuff. And then you're gonna be a great dentist wherever you go. And that's one thing that's really important to me.
Yeah.
Is you come here, you work, whether, as long as you've been here a year or so, you're gonna be a great dentist. You're gonna be able to get patients out of pain at a minimum. That's our oath, that's our job. Whether that means disinfecting the nerve, get the tooth out, get patients out of pain, regardless of what pays more or less. So if you can't do that, then you got a bigger problem. So that's a minimum level of competence. And then I get dentists who haven't even graduated dental school, and they're like, I'm gonna do what you're gonna do. And I'm like, okay, this is the path, but it's so relative. What I'd encourage people to do is just find whatever makes you happy, and just accept that you don't need to have all the answers at any one time.
Yeah.
I don't know if 5 years from now I'm going to be wanting to do this, or this will have taken a different direction. No one really knows. And if you look at your life and how you started and how I started, the odds of you and me sitting here together, I was born in Zimbabwe, and your parents were immigrants and mine were too. Like, what are the odds that we'd be here? But we're here talking about dentistry, something that we're both passionate about. So do good things and let life kind of shape and channel the rest.
I love that. That's great advice right there. Now, as far as the future goes, when it comes to DECA and also yours, I mean, you have a young family, the kids are growing up. We kind of shared that before we started here. But what do you see the future? Like, what do you see as far as DECA goes, as far as your own career?
Yes, I think, we were kind of unique in saying, look, we don't want to follow the 30-year-old model where we just roll up practices. Mm-hmm. We still do acquisitions if we think something's really cool and in a market where someone's doing something special. That's why we kind of wanted to build from scratch, so we can control our destiny, where we want to build, how we want to build, and hire the people we think are important. We don't want to inherit or be told this is what it has to be, mm-hmm. or you just have to grow. There's times you should grow and there's times you shouldn't grow. So we're going to just keep doing what we're doing. I think on a bigger scale, where the industry is going, I think there's a lot more sophistication on, from 10 years ago to 5 years ago, where people were just excited about being in the space. Mm-hmm. I think now it's like, well, everybody's doing that. What do you really do that's different? Like, how do you, we ask ourselves, can we take a clinician that's good and make them better? If we can't do that, then the rest doesn't really matter. And if we can do that, then everything else will follow. And as dentists, it's such a siloed profession. If you're in an individual practice, you see the same staff every day, mm-hmm. and you're working, a certain amount of patients. It gets lonely. And I remember feeling that even, when I was 4 or 5 years out of school. I'm like, I'm working hard, my back's hurting, didn't really get a lunch.
There's really no social media, there's no interaction, all those things.
You couldn't even share your stuff because you felt like I'm such a bad human for feeling that, and then you had to wake up and go do it again. Yeah. And no one's, as much as things have evolved, you still have to get them numb. The drill, even though the vibration and the sound may be better, there's still a little bit of, it's just a visceral component of dentistry, right? Yeah. So some of that, I think as things that you're doing and this community is evolving. I think it's just really important that we are supportive of each other and, you know, accepting that there's different ways of doing things, and without understanding it, you know, we can define what success is. It could be lifestyle, it could be money, it could be how many lives do you get to influence and change every single day. The last one is like what excites me the most right now.
Would you say that, again, I'm sure you get this all the time, people come up to you, you already alluded to this, like, hey, I want to do what you're doing, right? You know, and obviously it depends on the person, right? But if someone was just going to ask you for like, you know, what is like the one thing that I can do, you know, whether it's doing what you're doing or just being successful as a dentist, what would that advice be? Like, you know, whether it be, it could be like mindset, you know, maybe routine you do, but what's one thing you would tell them, like if they want to just be on that same path?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is, before wanting to be a great businessman and owner of multiple practices, become a great dentist.
Yeah.
Right? So if you can go do good dentistry and have a patient following and get it to whatever revenue you think is successful, great. You can probably do it at office number 2. You can probably do it at office number 3. Can you do that at office number 5 or 6? And here's a big difference, Glenn. Most dentists, good dentists, can do that as long as they're in the office. So the number one thing I get all the time is like, hey, you know, doc, when I'm in this office, it does well, but then I open a second office, I'm there. My associate sucks. The production dropped in half, but over there, that's going up. So now I'm going back there, that's gone up, and this is coming down.
Yeah.
What that is you're a great dentist. You're not a great executor of systems. And to scale something at scale where you're just like, I can open 100 of these, my systems work. People come to see and believe in my brand and my systems. That's not easy to do. Now you're transforming from a dentist, a clinician, to a businessman. And those are two very, very different things. And I think that's and there's nothing wrong. I think some people should be great clinicians because that's the best value for their patients and staff. They're just so good when they're in your mouth and they can comfort you. But I think we just live in this world, like you said, in social media where everyone thinks just because, oh, gosh, my classmate just opened his 3rd practice. And I was talking to a person who was in dental school, hadn't graduated, and the class before them, their friend had moved to Florida and already had 2 practices. And they're like, so I'm going to buy 2 and try to catch up. And why? You are completely different people. You don't know risk tolerance. You don't know skill level. You don't know where that guy's going to be in 5 years from now. But again, it's just in that moment, we're all like trying to compete with each other. Yeah. But what's relative? How do you really compete? Like what should we be competing on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the danger with you know, just with more on social media. It's easier to see what people are doing, but I always tell people that, look, I mean, just figure out what is important to you, right? If what's important to you is to open a lot of these practices, or maybe, you know, just doing more good clinical dentistry and increasing your skills, whatever's important to you, that should be all that matters, right?
Absolutely.
Who cares about what the guy next to you? I would say this, I mean, again, thank you so much for bringing us here, and I've just learned so much from talking to you. What would be your just like last words to those who are watching? We have a lot of dental students, dental entrepreneurs, dental professionals. A lot of like the whole community really tunes into our podcast. But what's your advice to them as an industry as a whole? Because a lot of times people are very pessimistic. They feel like, oh man, things are, you know, you probably heard this when you got out of school. When I opened my practice, people are like, well, you know, you're stepping out of the golden age. You know, you just missed the golden age. And I'm thinking to myself, man, no, it's still going there. But how do you feel as far as the future of dentistry, and what's your advice to everybody?
So the future of dentistry, and then I'll finish it with my advice. I mean, this is factual, so this is not just me saying it. Yeah. The number of applicants that have gone to dental assisting school in the last 10 years is drastically down. And post-COVID, it's also not improving, it's actually going down. There's more dentists that are going to be selling practices, and there's more dentists that are going to be graduating, and there's not going to be enough dental assistants. And so that shortage where some people feel like it's post-COVID or not, I think that's going to keep expanding. So I'm just kind of sharing that in terms of like, for us back in the day, you could, let's add a 3rd assistant or a 4th assistant, and you can really get them in. Today, dental assistants have options, and I think if they feel like they can get
do Uber Eats.
They can do Uber Eats, Chick-fil-A. They could get paid.
I mean, you can go to Buc. I mean, I drove by a Buc-ee's. My kids love going to Buc-ee's, and for those who are not in Texas, Buc-ee's is probably the coolest gas station.
And the cleanest.
And the cleanest, right? But I'm looking at, there's a sign, and you can work at Buc-ee's for like $18 an hour, and you can get a 6-figure income, if you're in management. That's the type of things that we have to compete with now.
And I think for the dentists listening, I think a lot of dentists just assume they're competing with DSOs and they're paying more. You're not. You're competing with Buc-ee's and all these big national chains. So one, just realize that, and there's no enemies here. That's just the market will kind of ultimately dictate where things go. And I think the piece of advice I would leave is two things. One, just follow your gut, because you have to be able to live with yourself. So if you want to take a chance, do it. If it feels wrong to jump out and own, and you kind of feel like you've got a path through associateship where you got equity and that can materialize, then follow that. There's always times to pivot. And the last piece is, do things that would make your mom proud, And I keep my mom's picture behind me because even though she passed on, I feel like she's always watching. So if you do that, you're going to do the right things. And when you do the right things, good energy and good karma will kind of surround you. It may not mean that you win today or tomorrow, but I think in life you'll win. So that's
I love that. Great advice. So, Dr. Ahmed, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
I appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
In the show notes, we'll have information more about DECA and where Dr. Ahmed, he speaks a lot. He has a lot of appearances. We'll put that on there as well. So thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.